During this panel discussion, we have brought Mr. Hirose and Mr. Katano, who are in charge of corporate IT of Yahoo and Line, to have a discussion about working in a remote environment, which has become the norm nowadays. It is said to be the era living with COVID-19, and in such an environment, we will talk about what preparations were done and how we responded to this discussion in this discussion titled "A Corporate ID Strategy for a New Way of Working." I am Yoshino, in charge of IT strategy at Line, serving as the MC. And I would like to hear from them the difficulties that are unique to a mega venture company with 10,000 employees, or the fun of working at corporate IT. Thank you. Now, I would like to start with a self-introduction of the members who are participating in this session. First, myself. My name is Yoshino, and I lead the IT strategy department, which does the implementation of systems used across the company within IT enterprise IT center that does the system implementation and operation at Line. And my boss is Mr. Katano, whom I will introduce later. Next, Mr. Katano. Hello, my name is Katano. I'm in charge of the internal systems at Line. My role is executive officer. And also, with regards to the service development, I'm also a board member of a subsidiary in charge of development in the growth area. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you very much. Hirose-san, please. My name is Hirose. I am the general manager of the IT department of Yahoo. I am in a similar way as Yoshino-san. I am in charge of the overall internal IT system. I am in charge of looking after them and provide them in a similar way. So thank you very much for inviting me as the person responsible for such an area. Thank you. Well, we are having a panel discussion in this manner today. So can you talk about your relationship? I mean, can you tell us how long you've known each other, or how you met and when? Okay. Well, originally, there was this forum to share different information about web IT departments, and I met with Hirose-san at that forum. I think it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, and we met there and shared information since then. So we've known each other and had drinks together too. Yes, that's right. I met Katano-san at that forum about 3 years ago, and because we're in the same industry and in the similar domain, so I asked him many things, and privately we had a lot of chats over drinks. Thank you. Well, I actually know Hirose-san too, and well, I think there's a lot of horizontal connection in this industry, and when there is a drinking occasion with people in this industry, I would participate too. So let's move on to today's agenda. First of all, I would like to have the two introduce us to your departments. I believe you have the missions of the department, so please introduce us to those missions too. So first, can I have Katano-san of Line to start? Yes. First, let's start from our mission. At our internal IT, our mission is that we continue to make a #1 workplace. Line seeks to provide the #1 service, and in order to do so, our mission is to continue challenging. And as the internal IT department that supports this mission, from the internal department, our users are the employees, and in the terms of services for the internal users, we seek to become the #1. That's our mission. And this is our organization overview. First, with regards to the Enterprise IT Center organization, there are two, one in Tokyo and another in Fukuoka. And as you see on the right. Sorry, now on the left. With regards to Fukuoka's IT support department, the organization itself is somewhat compact, so all the functions are available in this organization, from office network to information security, help desk, business application development, and operation are all done by this organization. Remaining departments are in Tokyo. Corporate IT department is mainly in charge of providing support to the back office, such as HR, general affairs, legal, and introducing services that are required. The next is the IT strategy department. As Yoshino-san mentioned earlier, company-wide SaaS services or services for the business LOBs, so the overall business systems that are used across the company are provided by this department. And another separate organization is the enterprise development team. With regards to this organization, there is no limit to a particular area. It's just that all the development engineers are assigned here. As the engineers, they are assigned to different teams in this organization. The organization structure is that all the engineers are concentrated in this department. In total, there is about 40 persons in Tokyo. There is about 25 in Fukuoka. So in total, there's about 65 members in the organization. Thank you. Next, can I have Hirose-san introduce us to the organization of Yahoo? Yes. Well, with regards to the mission of Yahoo Japan's IT division, well, it might be difficult to understand because this is in English, but our idea is to get excited by working. We're playing with the words in Japanese, but we're trying to provide systems that makes people excited when they're working. That's our mission. And in our case, our vision is update. That is probably similar to your idea being number one, but in a similar way, we are trying to update corporate IT. That is our vision. The mission seems to be somewhat vague, but we want to use many different things to make IT be leveraged in work so that people can be excited when they are working in this environment. We made this 2 years ago, and we haven't made changes since then, but we think that we can finally realize this in this COVID-19 environment. Please move on. With regards to the organization, since October, the development function that Katano-san mentioned earlier has moved from this organization. In this current organization, the system administration headquarters at the top and underneath there's the information system headquarters, and underneath there are 4 departments. One is the department in charge of IT infrastructure, and another is similar to Yoshino-san's department in charge of strategy or governance, called IT strategy department. And the others are service IT and IT service operation. They are close to platform development and operational service provisioning. So these 4 departments have developers or infrastructure engineers or teams in charge of planning or teams providing PC support. But because the domain is quite broad, so it cannot be contained in one department, so the organization is split into different domains, but instead formed in a cross-functional way. That's all. Thank you. Thank you. At Yahoo, there is a system administration headquarters, and underneath there is the information system headquarters. And I am wondering what the different roles are between the two.
In the case of Yahoo, as a company group, there is also a technology, corporate, media, and commerce. And in technology, there is system administration and data and science. And among them, those things which are not involved with the data and science, That is to say that where the developers are involved in, including the service platform, is under the system administration. So aside from information systems headquarters, there are 4 headquarters: cloud platform, site operation, that is the data center infrastructure, and also service platform and security team. So everything that is related to the developers are here. And also, since we have such a big team, they are divided into different groups. So we are not directly involved in the services, but indirectly. So we are in charge of the development infrastructure that looks at the company-wide. I see. In our case, infrastructure, information security, and service development, there are separate organizations. So that's the major difference between Line and Yahoo. I see. Thank you very much. Now, let's move on to the main topic of today. I will be asking several questions to both of you and have discussion. 2 companies are big companies, so I'm sure that it's a lot of work to try to develop and maintain the internal IT. There are different cultures and number of the sites, and the headcounts are all different. So I'd like to find out the differences between the 2 companies. Now, let's start with the first question. How large is the organization that you're supporting? The organization that introduces the systems. That's our first question. Including the group subsidiaries and others, I'm sure that you are both very big companies. So Katano-san, could you start? Well, yes, as I said at the beginning, right now, as a line group as a whole, we have a little less than 10,000 people. So the size is about 10,000. And Japan and overseas are about 50-50. So in Japan, we have about 5,000 or a little less than 5,000. So in terms of the online support, we have to support 10,000 people. And as for the local help desk and physical support that we get involved directly is about 5,000. That's the kind of a scope of our support. I see. So that if you include the subcontractors and temporary workers, or if you include them, maybe 20 to 30% more. So much higher than 10,000. Thank you. So Hirose-san, how about you? In our case, the size is about the same, but the difference is that we don't have any overseas offices or sites. So in Japan, about 7,000 to 8,000 full-time employees, and including the subcontractors and others, it'll be a little more than 10,000. And because of the COVID-19, some of the sites are not utilized, but those sites are distributed from Okinawa to Hokkaido, so more than 10 different sites. So we have nationwide distributed places that we need to support. We have a network infrastructure distributed. So in terms of support, it's quite distributed, so sometimes it's challenging. So they're concentrated into the Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, and Fukuoka. Oh, you have a site in Okinawa, yes. Maybe the difference, for example, in the case of Line Group, we have many sites in Asia. But in the case of Yahoo, mainly big organizations in Japan. I see. Thank you. Now, the second question. What are the characteristics of both companies' IT perspectives? Earlier, you mentioned that differences of the sites and offices. Now, from the perspective of corporate IT, what are the characteristics? Now, let's start with Hirose-san. Well, I don't know whether it changes the impression of Yahoo, but we have repeated the internal development. So we do have a lot of in-house systems. Those systems are utilized inside of Yahoo as a matter of course, but for example, other companies are using more SaaS and others. So in some cases, we're finding that it's easier to use rather than make. So in development of the corporate IT, we are what we call focusing on what we call make use. So of course that where we need to be very unique and original, we would develop it as corporate IT. But where the differentiation is not necessary, we would like to take advantage of what is available. So about a year ago, we decided to do so. So we are changing where we can, and when we cannot change, we would develop on our own. So we are still working on it. This is work in progress. But in the past, we placed an order to the vendors to develop the corporate IT. But at Yahoo, we are currently trying to organize so that we can differentiate the ones that we need to develop and the ones that we can utilize something which is available. Right, in the case of Yahoo, I have an image that you have your own chat and storage. So are you changing that into using the cloud services or chat? Yes, of course, we have our in-house chat, but now what is widely utilized these days is something that we are using. I cannot give you the specific name, but so if when the systems are widely utilized, we will take advantage of them. So we do not develop everything internally. Katano-san? Well, biggest thing is that as I said, that half of our offices and sites are overseas. Also, there are various people from different countries, nationalities, and the needs are very much diversified. That probably is the major point. One of the characteristics of LINE, the headquarters is Tokyo, Japan, but doesn't mean that everything is decided top-down. So we're not really instructing all the subsidiaries or the group companies to work a certain way. So there is a freedom there. So each country has different needs, different requests. So how do you incorporate them? So that is a bit difficult to accommodate. And maybe that's one of the characteristics that we have. So from your perspective, any particular country which is more difficult than the others or unique? Well, the country with the kind of uniqueness or originality, well, it's not really a country, but for example, the major sites that we have is Taiwan and Thailand. So there are more development engineers. So when there are more development engineers, they would make their own. So they have their own way of building. So as a whole, we need to care for the governance. So that happens. Of course, we appreciate that they do their own, but how to manage the total picture is something that we need to work on. We want to make it free, but we have to strike a good balance, and balance is difficult. From our perspective, if I may talk about our company, when we have a chat, my chat is translated into English and Korean. So people in English-speaking or Korean-speaking countries, they can read my chat in their own languages. That's quite impressive. They're translated into 4 different languages. Yes, interpretation, translation are absolute necessary in our case.
In that context, support is the same. We need to, of course, provide that in Japan and other languages too in the support. So in that context, from the headquarters, all the information is managed, and it's going to be difficult, and it's very difficult to centralize the information. So we have distributed that quite well. Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. When introducing a corporate-wide system, you tend to receive many opinions. But what do you keep in mind? Starting from Katano-san. Things that I keep in mind. Well, it depends. But if it's a corporate-wide implementation, what you're assuming is not a single department, but a corporate-wide implementation. And if that's the case, it's not few hundred, but instead it's probably a few thousand users. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just in Japan, but also in overseas as well. So obviously it needs to be multilingual. And logging accounts need to be centrally managed by things like SSO. And one thing that definitely needs to be ensured is that the corporate-wide system can be used seamlessly. So for corporate-wide systems, these are the must-met items. And since it's a certain scale, so I need to keep in mind the quality and do QA. So things like quality, I keep in mind. Thank you. How about you, Hirose-san? Well, in our case, the worldwide implementation and multilingual support might be different to line, but with regards to quality, because it is a corporate-wide implementation, the focus is quite large. But even though you spend the time for validation, it never is perfect. So we try to start small whenever possible and try out first and gradually expand. That's the approach we recently started. If it doesn't work then, we can withdraw before we expand too much. Because once we expand it, it will be very difficult to close. So in case of a corporate-wide implementation, we take care to start small, and once it is successful, then we expand further. That's the gradual steps we try to take. But there are some things you don't know until you expand. And in case of capacity, you encounter a situation of falling short of capacity because of the large expansion in some cases. So in terms of functionality and capacity, some things are unknown until you reach the scale. And if you use third-party systems like SaaS systems, sometimes it doesn't work, even if you deploy it in the areas that are guaranteed. And there are also some cases where we find things after using it. So those are the things that we were not identified through the development. And so I feel the need for having to try out and iterate on that. And especially with the COVID-19 environment, something just spread without doing anything, especially for things like a viral communication, it spread without any trouble. So there are some things like that. So I want to be able to provide good things at the right timing. Starting in the balance becomes pretty difficult depending on the timing. I'm seriously feeling that lately. Question. When we implement systems, is it a top-down instruction from the management or are the decisions made within the IT department? Well, it can be both, but the top management does not instruct us to implement a particular system that often. Instead, the departments would select the products and receive approvals for the most cases. Is it difficult to receive approvals? Well, that depends. But from a money perspective, if the scale is large, then yes, from a money perspective, it's sometimes very difficult. Well, if the scale is large, it can be costly. Yeah, understood. Thank you. Well, we're getting a lot of momentum, so we are somewhat rushing through, but let's move on to the next question. In the course of both companies growing into such a large size, what were the difficulties you had in IT implementation? Hirose-san, please. Okay. Well, it's been about 3 years since I became the HQ lead, and maybe we haven't achieved growth yet. Environment surrounding us and the situation in the company are starting to change, and services and the products being used are gradually changing too. With related to that, the way we do things and the way of thinking or the way of operation are causing struggles in the field. And since I have been working adult for a long time, and an old way of thinking would not work anymore. So, which means that there are a lot of opportunities for us, including myself, to grow. So sometimes I start to think from scratch. There are rules and governance in place, and we are seeing many cases where these don't work. So we want to make them better. Well, some things are rigid for protection, and nothing can be done. But how we improve the convenience while we keep the protection and the type of added value we are asked to provide. Conventionally, systems were on premise and built in house, running on servers, but things are starting to change. So, including the mindset, people probably need to change. Unless otherwise, even when we're using things, we need to keep an eye on many aspects. So, I think that's the difficulty we have, but that probably leads to people's development. But I think we're all struggling a lot. Well, there was a news around remote work the other day, but are you seeing acceleration because of that? Well, yes. Actually, we are seeing more use cases that were not assumed before. Conventionally, the infrastructure was managed by ourselves, and we worked hard to support the remote work occasionally in case we have something called Dokodemo Office that's available 5 times a month. And this could be used at home or even places like cafe. But now something similar is done all day, every day. So we noticed many things that were overlooked before, like the home environment caused many issues and ended up not being able to maintain the quality we intended. So some things are not enough. Although the company prepared the facilities, PC may not be insufficient in some cases. So we were able to discover new things or things that were not thought of before. So it started in April this year, and it's close to 6 months now. At the beginning, we were in the phase of responding to the change. But since October, things are finally settling down, so we are trying to make things work more smoothly. We were only having troubles first and did not have the growth phase, but we want to build that now.
So what about you, Katano-san? Well, I think that we always talk about the global matters, but aside from global, well, in the case of Line, as a total, we started with 1,000 people, and we saw the annual growth of 20, 30, 40%. So we have been growing very fast. So the size, 1,000 people, and current size, 10,000 people. So when we use systems, for example, providing manual information to make sure that the people get it, 1,000 people is easy, but 10,000 is quite impossible. So to be able to do it from one side is one thing, but in addition to that, inside the organization, we want to make sure that people help each other. In the particular organization, people should share information. So we would like to make sure that that works because of the size. So providing the way of providing support is very different. That is what I'm feeling. So it's very difficult to make sure that information or support are well available to everyone. That is very difficult to do. 1,000 people, 2,000 people, maybe when we get to the 2,000, it becomes exponentially difficult. Right. Providing support by one team is extremely difficult to do. I see. Yes, since I joined the company, what surprised me was that there are a lot of well-prepared manuals. It's very well prepared. Right, there are many manuals in our case too. So people can use those manuals and they can do it themselves. Okay, thank you. Now the last question. How did you prepare for different ways of working? We have been talking about the COVID-19. So how did you prepare yourself? I'd like to hear from you. So starting with Katano-san. Yes. Well, now talking about the different ways of working, as I said already, in the case of LINE, we have many offices outside of Japan. So this year, we don't have many business trips, but usually we have many business trips. We have a lot of movement of people. So we don't really work in a fixed office, but rather we move around to work. So I myself, it's the same thing. I moved a lot. So we have to make sure that we can work while we are moving around. So the environment where we can work, even when we are traveling, is something that we have created. So now, because of the telework, remote work, this experience has been applied. So for example, web conference, file server, and so forth. In addition to the office network, you can access these from outside using the cloud storage. In terms of, well, it's not really a system. It has to do with culture. So not always having the face-to-face meetings. We had a lot of remote meetings, even in Shinjuku office. In the case of LINE, there is an office in Shinjuku. But even in Shinjuku office, there are multiple offices, so you can use the remote conference using the web. So we already had the kind of online remote working system, and we have done a lot of enlightenment activities so that people can effectively utilize that time. So that was quite helpful. And we were happy that we had those experiences before the COVID pandemic. So keeping the log of how people are working at home, so you can manage the working time, that kind of system was developed recently. Well, yes. What we had in the past was use a line beacon. So when people comes into the office, we can automatically log it. But that was not available with the pandemic. So we wanted to make sure that we can manage the working time at home. So yes, that's what we are dealing with right now. Yes, there are many things that you have to do to accommodate the teleworking, remote working. Hirose-san? Yes. As Katano-san said, we already had the system of remote working, teleworking, so we were already ready. And that's what I felt in April. So it was quite helpful and effective, was my objective view. But we did not expect this to be continued. And we also did not expect that people would be working from their homes. We did not really think of the not going out of your home. So based upon the location, we were not fully prepared. Depending on their home environment, well, we were not paying much attention to that before. So including the network, monitor, table, chairs, some people did not have those. So after 6 months, we started to see those issues. So when the things that we provide break down, what do you do? So in the past 6 months, this lack of preparedness, we worked on that and we tried to make improvements, but still we are not ready to move 100% remote work. So we have to have some people at the help desk so that we can help people with PC. Also, some of the people still have to be there physically in order to have a network connection. Some people need to help. So we really have to rethink the way of working. So once again, we were not fully prepared. So if the Tokyo did have a kind of semi-lockdown, and we did have some concerns at that time. So in October and onwards, we needed to make some improvements, and we needed to make changes so that we can we do not have to depend on people too much. So as Katano-san said, we need somebody who would work with me inside. So not just with one team, but we wanted to have people who would cooperate with us. And we also talked about some private matters. We also recognize that it's very important to have a relationship outside of the company. We want to learn the good practices from other companies so that we can take advantage of them. So we need the collaborators and cooperators inside and outside so that we can utilize their ideas. So I'm not really answering your question directly, but those are the things that need to be done as a preparation. So internal IT, when you look at there are competitors, of course, but through the information sharing, you can grow many companies can grow together. Yes, that's exactly what I felt, and we actually exchanged information. I think that many people are interested in those, so I did get a lot of questions about the internal IT. Okay, thank you very much. Now we completed all the questions that we prepared, and of course the size and culture are different between the two companies, but I think we learned quite interesting things from two companies. Okay, so that concludes this session, but lastly, we'd like to hear from both of you. Katano-san. Right. Next year, our management will be integrated. And as a web company to have 10,000 people, it's quite rare. So there are a lot of know-hows that we have that we cannot share with other companies. I'm sure that there are similar issues, but together with Yahoo, we can share those know-hows. So we are looking forward to this integration, and we want to make this working environment even better. Thank you. Hirose-san, last message. Well, thank you very much for the invitation today. Yes, as Katano-san said, toward next year, we would like to work together. So whenever we can cooperate, we would like to do so. And also, as Yoshino-san said, there are differences of the cultures. So we want to take advantage of the uniqueness of each other. So we would like to make sure that we can do so. Okay, thank you very much. That's all. Thank you. Thank you very much.